in the year of our Luigi 2020, we've all become Cable Guy.
And during the few moments that we have left, we want to talk right down to earth in a language that everybody here can easily understand.
Welcome again to High Level Casting. Today we are talking about the movie that everyone didn't go and see in the summer of, what year was it, guys?
1996.
1996, the wonderfully excitable Jim Carrey in the horribly dark yet hilarious comedy, The Cable Guy. I'm joined today with my esteemed colleagues, foreign correspondent Ethan. We've got Zach and Doug.
I prefer the big ragu.
So this one has been near and dear to our hearts. I feel like we all kind of ran into it at different times. Whenever I finally went and saw this film, the one scene that always stuck out in my mind and is still one of my favorite scenes in like a Jim Carrey film still has to be the medieval knights duel. And if you could encapsulate this film in like one 10-minute intersection where you could just snip it right out and just remove all of the anxiety and homoeroticism, that is your typical Jim Carrey skit.
All right, you want to play rough? Daddy can play rough! It's like when Spock had to fight Kirk on Star Trek. Best friends forced to do battle.
Jim Carrey, right?
Excellent.
Jim Carrey. This is a classic. What more needs to be said?
So, Zach, what goes on in The Cable Guy?
This film is very intriguing in multiple ways, but it, in a nutshell, is a cable guy played by Jim Carrey who has an addictive need to make friends wherever and however he can. And he finds himself in the home of our main character, who's played by Matthew Broderick, and basically inserts himself into his life and helps and continuously hinders him throughout his romantic exploits of trying to recover his relationship with his proposed to girlfriend that dropped him at the very beginning of the film. So we get to see a roller coaster in multiple ways through friendship, family, and romantic partners, and the chaos that ensues, really.
You'll laugh, you'll cry, you'll learn a few things by the end
You'll
of it.
feel deeply unsettled and angry.
One of my favorite breakdowns, like one sentence breakdown, was that this film depicts a man experiencing desperation for a friend, which ultimately becomes a hunt for a brother, and ends with the opportunity to find a family that could accept him for all while at the expense of someone else.
Interesting.
Heart emoji.
With that said, it's important to break down and take note of Jim Carrey's acting career leading up to this point, as well as directly after it, as well as many big names that overlaps with this film, being both actors, directors, etc. Doug, Big Ragu.
You got it, baby.
Big Ragu.
Doug has left the building, but a man wearing a fake mustache with a name tag that only says The Big Ragu has joined us.
The Big Ragu has ascended.
You can't see it right now, but Doug just decided at that moment to take a nice big swig of beer.
So this film had a rocky road, you might say.
I think it's important to examine this movie in the context of the Carrey canon that I have coined. This is a phrase I have coined just now.
The cinematic tradition, yeah,
right,
performative tradition.
Not to be confused with the Jim Carrey cinematic universe.
Do we include In Living Color in this?
Absolutely.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
That is a formative text
This is like Zizek studies.
Yes.
It's a department. It's Carey studies. Can I just say, so we're talking about Jim Carrey, and it sounds like with your introduction, Jeremy, you guys had right. You guys thought like he was hilarious in this movie. Would you say that?
Yeah,
No.
I would.
I fucking hated him in this movie, and I think it's just like I cannot deal with. I guess maybe Doug, you can talk about this more, but like he is a very distinct force in comedy, especially in the 90s, right? He's like, it's his specific full body like vaudevillian. He is a jester pulled from hell and put on our screens. It repulses me on a very basic level to watch him just making noise and stuff. But please, I don't really know much about his career, so please divulge in me, Carey scholar.
But I give you guys a crash course in Carey studies.
Carey 101, baby.
So, as we established earlier, The Cable Guy came out in 1996. By this point, Jim Carrey has probably, like, speaking strictly about his comedy career, I think it's safe to say that he peaked because just 2 years before, we have Ace Ventura: Pet Detective, Dumb and Dumber, and The Mask, which is, it still blows my mind that all three of those movies came out in the same year.
Oh, wow.
Right? Yeah, he was working.
Between that year and 1996, when The Cable Guy comes out, we get the sequel to Ace Ventura: Pet Detective, Ace Ventura: When Nature Calls.
Nature Calls.
And then we get what is easily the outlier out of all of these movies so far, Batman Forever.
Mm-hmm.
Batman Forever is probably the role that is the most different of all his roles by this point, and that he is playing not just the villain of a movie, but a Batman villain.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
It's almost a transition into his role in The Cable Guy, in a way.
Can I say that the Riddler is a very Carrey-esque figure, and like he was acting as Jim Carrey, right? He's dancing around, he's making the noises, he's doing the music with his voice. He is very like, that is a time and place character, right? For a very different sort of Batman movie.
Mm.
Well, and what's interesting too is with The Mask, when Carrey is the Mask, you could argue that, when he is that, demigod, that is also one of the villains of that film. And I think also, like, his comedy is very hit or miss with folks. Vaudevillian is right. Like, when I was watching him do the karaoke and sing the Jefferson Airplane song in his own tone for, an extended, like, full... the entire song, mind you.
It's my turn.
1, 2, 3. When the truth is found to be lying, and all the joy within you dying, don't you want somebody to love? Don't you need somebody to love?
Carrey, he does not fit in normal society. The way that he's acting, if you were going to go out onto the street or into a grocery store, you would have the cops called on you if you acted in the way that Carrey does in his films. He's basically a cartoon character, and he causes, in every one of his films, that personality is destructive. It can be destructive for good in like Ace Ventura, where that personality is pointed like a gun at the bad guys. But I think what's interesting that you bring up that he's not funny to you, Ethan, is that I think that's kind of the point, is when that personality is pointed not towards like a comic book villain, when it's pointed towards a normal person who just is dealing with normal person problems. The difference between The Cable Guy and all these other films is that this sheer force of personality is now focused intently on a normal average human being. and that is kind of what makes it unsettling. And I think also like that kind of broach of, you know, the boundary of fantasy and reality is one of the reasons why this hits as horror, and that why general audiences probably rejected it. It's like suddenly you have to recognize Jim is not the Riddler or this green-faced mask fellow that's going to take out the mob for you. But now the mask is following you home from work, right?
And
so,
the mask is ultimately a deranged pervert.
Yes.
This is a pervert film for a pervert society, I want to say.
I mean,
But
that's most of his films, I'd have to say.
well, and like, despite how zany his character is in this movie, it's also one of the more reined in and more down to earth characters, if that makes sense. Just because I feel like I have met people with aspects of his personality.
Okay, yeah, for sure.
So,
and the hairstyle.
Mm-hmm.
To me, although this character of Chip is very radical that Jim plays, I do not see this being that ridiculous of a character premise, though, because although they're extremes, it is relatable. Like, that's what I was picking up, like what you're referencing about the character. You don't like him and everything. He's not funny. He's not supposed to be funny. But the thing is, for me, throughout the film, you constantly are going back and forth on hating and liking him. But
You say so.
like you mentioned, the in our chat, you're like, I really wanted Chip to die right here. You know, I was like, oh, okay. He really doesn't like him, but
no.
So to reflect what you were saying, though, in terms of his career and him peaking at this point, it's very interesting that when he walked into this movie, he received the largest contract an actor has received in history at that point.
Up to 96.
With making
Whoa.
$20 million.
Which is
I did not know that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So he, in a sense, like, he reset the standard at that time for actors and their compensation. So walking into that, there were high expectations from audience and critics for this film in more ways than one. I think it's really important to bring in that financial aspect because it costs so much for Jim Carrey, and like I said, which was $20 million for the role. The movie's final gross was just $60 million domestically and $102 million worldwide, which was significantly less than other Jim Carrey movies, meaning The Mask, Ace Ventura, Pet Detective, and what was the other one?
Batman Forever.
And then the movie cost a total of $47 million to make, and they chose not to have a major marketing campaign in any sorts. And one thing that I found really interesting was the idea that the movie had been a disaster when it first came out was widely circulated by rival studio and production companies because they were angry that Columbia Studios set such a higher market for star actor salaries.
Interesting.
They're speculating on Jim Carrey, right? They knew that he had this star quality, and so they paid the biggest bucks of all to get him in this movie.
So it's just really interesting setup towards, there are multiple things. All these pieces had to fall together, but the lack of marketing and putting out the trailers and information that they wanted or should have put out, I should say, in combination with the backlash from all angles really kind of set this film up to fail in a way that his other films did not, even though it is, to this day, I would say, his most held up film from that time frame.
Interesting.
You can watch this film today, which I did. I had not seen this movie up until just a couple days ago. I actually bought it and said, "Screw it! Let's buy it, watch it." And
you bought it?
I rewatched it.
It's on Netflix, today. Baby. For free.
Is it on Netflix?
It's on Japanese Netflix. By the way,
see, nice try.
This movie has Japanese dubs. and
Nice.
Brazilian Portuguese, which is very curious to me. Not all movies do, and so I'm always wondering what American movies people here have seen. I bet Jim Carrey was a big pull in the 90s in Japan.
I hope to God that the Cable Guy had just seeped into Japanese culture in some way.
I can feel it. So you mentioned like that it holds up. I will say this is a prescient movie.
It really is.
Oh,
It really,
absolutely.
yeah, it hits on themes that will like push off in 95 or 96 maybe.
Near
but, like,
prophetic film almost. At a certain
now is like so real that bringing them up is almost like cliche. And I think that's pretty cool.
Yeah. Before we move on from just kind of analyzing the film and its audience, you have this payout, right? Where he's getting, who's the big male star? Like Tom Cruise money, Brad Pitt money. You would think that the most expensive actor would be the,
Nick Cage at this point
yeah,
in the 90s.
Nick Cage money, right? Con Air money. But the misstep is in all of these other films that we've discussed, The Mask, Ace Ventura, Batman Forever, even eventually Liar Liar, none of them alienate a child audience. The Cable Guy is not a film for kids. And I think that's the big misstep. Some of those poor reviews were probably parents taking their kids to see this movie and not experiencing, a violent bathroom assault, which, he does do again in Liar Liar, but it is on himself. And so that makes it okay.
I distinctly remember seeing Ace Ventura: Pet Detective when it was out in theaters, and I was 5 years old.
Yep, similar.
One of my neighbors took me along with him and his dad, and looking back, I realized the hardest I laughed at a movie, I think, only to be matched by Borat while in theaters. But yeah, that was a weird movie to see. I had no idea what to make of Sean Young's character at the end with the big reveal.
All right. Can I just say, right? Yeah. 2 movies probably forever impacted my sexual development as a child. And it's Ace Ventura and GoldenEye. I watched those way too young. They both still burn in my mind deeply.
Bumped you up a couple levels.
Yeah.
Like
long before I knew what a sex was, I knew
sub was.
Then you're crushing me. Yowza. Anyway, I'll tell you what is shaping my sexuality now in this movie. Matthew Broderick, America's sweetheart. He's the cutest boy. I love him.
I have this friend, and he gave his cable guy $50, and then he got all the movie channels for free. Did you ever hear of anything like that?
He hasn't even done Inspector Gadget yet.
Adorable, small bean. He's so cute. I just want to protect him. But we got true Joker mode Jim Carrey here, spitting at mid-90s Gen X society. Matthew Broderick, right, is like the Gen X protagonist du jour. But right? He's not quite just a normal guy. And this was weird to me. And it feels like a directing choice that evolved during the course of the film. At the beginning of the movie and the end of the movie, he's very much like a caricature character, much like Jim Carrey's, and that he's a very anxious and like nervous, innocent person, right? Just a very like lawful good type cute boy. And then in the middle of the movie, he's just like normal Gen X guy. And it is very much like the Gen X hero is my girlfriend left me because I'm not true to myself. And I need to figure out what my life is, even though he's got like the nice job.
Yeah, he's very successful.
Which is a Ben Stiller thing too, because we all see this in Reality Bites, the balance between got to make the cash, but you don't want to be a sellout. That is deep in there. And so looking at Matthew Broderick here, he's at a crossroads. You see a little bit of the producers in him, right? Where he's like the hyper character of Matthew Broderick in The Producers is this very nervous, quirky guy. That here he's like balanced between trying to be sexy, charismatic Ferris Bueller, but then he's like the everyman. I felt very sympathetic.
He's everyman Matthew Broderick in this.
I loved it. I loved how he like tried to put on the alpha mindset shit. You know, he's like, this is going to sell it. Oh, I'm watching HBO,
all
baby. You come over.
due to
It
the
works.
advice that he was being handed to from a crazy person.
By the dark chick.
Free cable
it worked.
is the ultimate aphrodisiac.
Well, so I think in the subject of just trying to stay on top here, you did mention Ben Stiller.
Mm-hmm.
So it's important to note that Ben Stiller actually directed this film.
He did.
You mentioned his first directed film was Reality Bites, which was a couple years before this in 1994, which had mixed reviews, and then he did not direct anything until this. But so he dove into acting roles, which his next role was Heavyweights. Wonderful.
Yeah, boy,
wonderful film. But I found it really interesting that this film, the script for this was written already before Ben Stiller and Judd Apatow jumped in on the project.
Yeah, right.
The original director, of which I do not know his name, but the original creative mind behind it stepped away, and Ben Stiller and Judd Apatow jumped in, and they completely rewrote the script. So much that it was actually the role that Jim Carrey ended up filling was actually initially written for
Chris Farley.
It was written for Chris.
Oh, wow.
So
yeah,
should have been.
It's an interesting layer because it could, by chance, due to poor marketing campaign, complete rewrite, in combination with like just maybe communication with the studios, that there just was a disconnect, maybe, or some. That's just my speculation.
Well, I think just reading about the development of this, it sounded like it started as the character of Jim Carrey was supposed to be like a quirky Uncle Buck type, kind of like lovable but socially awkward.
It was
but
actually
funny
Jim
and
Carrey.
endearing.
It was actually Jim Carrey himself who really kind of pushed the
Who
direction
put it
of his
into
character.
the weird dark stalker elements. Yeah,
wanted
Judd
that to
Apatow
be-
and Jim Carrey
I'm so
together.
happy he did, though. Let's point that out right now. That
It made it a
makes
different
this
movie.
film,
Yeah,
a completely different film and a very unique film.
He took his career in his own hands and he's like, no,
Can't do
I'm
it.
pivoting. We want this to be something different. Let me make this something different.
It's like, I need to show you what a Riddler can do.
Yeah.
in
Also,
real
he's
society.
riding high since his agent basically, earned his pay. Jesus
Big money,
Christ.
big money hustlers.
I can do what I want. You're paying me $20 million.
Right.
So in my introduction to this film, I happened to glaze over the topic at hand being television. So Chip is a byproduct of the influence that cable possessed early on in that time frame. What, in the spirit of possession, what made your bones crawl in this film,
Ooh,
Ethan?
okay.
What really spoke to you? And because you're a fan of the horror, you're a fan
I
of
love my horror
the dark
movies.
side of
Rattled
things.
the
Even if it's
blood.
meant to be one thing, you see it the other way.
How do I set it up? Right. I talked about it a little bit before, but we have like Matthew Broderick wants to have his own Gen X coming of discovery moment where he's like, what do I do to get my girl back, my very 90s girlfriend back? But then his life is invaded by a Chip.
And why does he have to get his girl back? She dumped him for
she dumped him because
proposing.
he's too clingy.
Yeah,
He's
that's
too clingy. He's trying to commit, and she's like,
Yes.
no, I'm not ready for that.
He's
And
too
then
perfect.
Kicked him out. By the way, can I just say, I want his apartment is so nice.
Was nice.
Very like that building. Beautiful. All of the living spaces in this movie are wonderful.
Yeah, they're fantastic, especially as Jim Carrey crawls through them.
Right? Yeah, crawls through them, chewing the scenery. From the get-go, Chip is a weird dude, clearly. And also, and we see this now more than ever, right? We want to talk about nice guys and incel culture. He's pulling all the nice guy tricks, but like in a not romantic setting with a little asterisk there. I'd say it's a very romantic setting, right? Mm-hmm. He's showering Matthew Broderick with gifts and assuming that his acceptance of those gifts, when really he's just like too passive to say no thank you. The acceptance of those gifts is an opening for him to start a relationship, right? That's what Chip sees. Like, I got a new friend. I'm going to fix his life. And we get that reveal of like who Chip is as a person. And it's sort of brought up in the very beginning of the movie, right, is just channel switching through many different channels. And it's all on like weird, there's a lot of like daytime drama, Jerry Springer type stuff, kind of sex related. We see a dude getting a massage by a lady in a bikini who then reveals that I am a man, and right, all these sorts of things are happening. And that sort of frames the psyche of this character as a man who is driven by these shock impulses, right? He needs to constantly be shocking everyone, and just dominating everyone around him. We see that physically with the basketball game where he goes way too hard on a casual game at the medieval times, which I hated. I'm sorry.
Chip experiences blurred lines between fantasy and reality.
Yes,
and
absolutely.
They have the flashbacks a lot with him,
his young Sheldon form.
Exactly. And it's really important to know that blurred line is represented by the constant static that is being shown.
Yeah. Good point, right? So really,
implying his psychological depravity.
Right. So Matthew Broderick is trying to get this guy out of his life, but he's too nice. He is a really nice guy, not capital N, capital G. He's a good boy. He's a cute, good boy. Oh, I'm sorry, but I wish I was 16 in 1995 or 96 so I could be like madly in love with Janine Garofalo.
Yeah.
Right?
I thought that's where you were going to go.
Oh, medieval times. I was like, I hate all of this except Janine Garofalo. God.
But like punk goddess Janine Garofalo.
Yes.
Dude,
so
I've got
good.
other tables.
Right? Yeah. I'll be your serving wench. Anyway, so the moment, right, it's sort of balancing between trying to be like a straight-laced kind of movie. It's interesting aesthetically. The scene that turned for me, much like the blood orgy in Heavyweights, was the karaoke scene, right? And so you might say it would be the restaurant with Owen Wilson, but that one's bad too. But before that, the karaoke scene is like very perverse to me, right? In the way they show all of these very strange looking people, all of Jim Carrey's friends, his premium subscribers who he hooks up with free cable. And they're all either like very, very old or very like McPoyle looking extras.
Or they're prostitutes.
Bunch of blue collar looking.
Yeah, very, we can say blue collar.
Yeah.
And
one
then,
very scary cop.
One very scary old cop and one very attractive woman. And we see Matthew Broderick. Steve. We see Steve.
Steven.
Succumb for the first time. And it's a very lurid succumbing, right? It's a weird face massage.
Oh, yeah.
And then when she like jumps on him, right? Because he wants to stay faithful to his girlfriend, though they're separated, but he's like succumbing to Jim Carrey's influence. And like as he's about to have sex with this girl, he pops in and takes a picture. And it's just this very perverted thing. You can see the setups that are happening, right? Jim Carrey is taking this power over him.
In relation to the getting him to do what he wants and like what was the term that you used? Subverting him?
Dominating him?
Dominating. Well, it's I one thing that I always caught whenever he was either getting him to do something that he wanted or just planting seeds of not necessarily doubt but control, he always got like really close to him, whether like, in his face or right next to his ear and almost like tonguing his ear or like whispering seductively at, and it was always in those moments where they just got real close together and you're just, and it's it kind of catapulted the scene or the direction that the movie was going, I felt.
Right. And you can't tell, right? It's probably played for laughs, but also with that creepy element that, it's a very sexually charged performance by Jim Carrey towards Matthew Broderick's character. And it just gets more and more sexual. And so also he's taking every point out of the abuser's handbook. And he's like, I am infiltrating this person's personal relationships. And I'm like, making my presence in his life unescapable, which starts becoming very terrifying. First, there is where he's going to save Steve's relationship with Robin by crashing her date with a very incredibly Owen Wilson. Beautiful bit role. But he corners this man in the bathroom, right? The date's not going well. And then Owen Wilson's like, I need to go take a leak, babe. But you go, I care about your life.
Your job, what's that like? What's your job like?
It's a little crazy right now. We're just sort of
Hold that thought for just a second. I need to use the head, and I'll be right back. I want to find out about your job. I'm interested. I'm curious about it.
He goes to the bathroom, and Jim Carrey is in there waiting for him and proceeds to not quite violently.
He bought off the
what's the name of the porter? I don't
attendant, bathroom attendant.
I've never seen a person do that in real life. I don't think it's real.
I have seen a bathroom attendant once.
There are a lot of
Crazy
bathroom attendants in Jim Carrey films.
Yeah, right. It's like a very
Ace Ventura for sure.
It implies a level of elegance that for the place that they're at. It's a way for your mind to be like, oh, he's taking her to a good place.
To the nice place.
There's
He's got the nice chunky sweater on, which again,
the fake mustache.
Can I just say,
which is my favorite part, along with the corduroys I think he's wearing. Like,
yeah, boy. Yeah. I'm sorry. I'm taking notes. It's back. Normcore is back, and this movie is leading the way.
The punchline of the artist sketch, where Matthew Broderick is on his bed eating his bowl of cereal. And he just sees this very apt, very Unabomber creepy artist sketch of Jim Carrey about this bathroom assault. Which,
we didn't mention the assault. It's like a rape scene.
Yes.
Like, it's very coded as a rape scene. Or, like, he gives Owen Wilson a swirly, and that's fine, whatever. Powders him, disfigures him with things. And then proceeds
lays
to
hands
say,
on him real hard.
Just suck it, and pushes his face onto the blow dryer, and he's whispering aggressively into his ear as Owen Wilson is forced to take on this submissive role. It's disturbing on a very deep level. But I'd say the most unsettling part of this movie for me, and this is where I was making predictions that were subverted in the movie, was so Matthew Broderick is trying to force Chip out of his life. Chip is like, I'm going to get revenge on you, sends him to jail. And we begin to realize that, this man is not really a cable guy. He's something else.
So he gets sent to jail. How? Because he
has all these free things that Chip gave him, right?
And more importantly, it's a side effect of him not being able to say no to him, just like you mentioned earlier.
Right, exactly.
Everything that it just continues to build for him until he finally says, you know what, I can't be your friend, like you're saying, and he snaps. And it's just like, if he could have just said no in the beginning.
Right.
And Steven tried to say no several times, but gets cut off. Until
I will say, he did try,
and you know that he's cutting him off intentionally. Like, he's like, "Oh, no."
This is a very practiced form of behavior by somebody who is used to taking power in abusive relationships.
Right, exactly.
That he is, not a normal cable guy. We find out that there is a pattern and a history of manipulation and abuse
of stalking, literally stalking
his.
That we learn from. As much as I hate Jim Carrey, I grow every day more and more to love Jack Black, and he's a beautiful man. He's
caught on so quickly, but
he's a good friend. Right. Yeah, he's the best friend in the horror movie. That's he's
getting edged out.
Yeah, he's seeing this loss in his own life.
There was a couple things that you said, Ethan, about building up to your horror aspects here that I kind of, if I may, I'd like to just touch on. Chip has a real loose grip of reality. And in that distortion, he views friendship as something that is bought or purchased and not necessarily earned through regular human interaction.
Right.
And this is due mostly to being raised off of cable and TV that has taught him that influence. Like, that's one of the, like, I feel like a lot of the things that you've been mentioning is like the way that cable influences people, especially in this time frame. Like there was a scene with the Tony Robbins commercial where Steven was down in the dumps and he was just like, oh, I should buy this like infomercial set. Like, yeah, he was like, okay, like I need to buy this, just because he was watching his TV at the time. But he believes that influence is the key to success, and ultimately he plays into that. And an example is that is his preferred customers, like you mentioned.
Right.
These are all
secretly controls everyone in town.
These are
like
all
the
people
Joker
that he has
in the Dark
stalked
Knight.
down individually, you can assume, and gotten them into his grips,
blackmailed him or something. They seem to be happy with it.
He's able to send him to jail because of his preferred customer, the sheriff who was at the karaoke party, the operator, the Medieval Knights,
right.
restaurant, like, so
fucking Andy Dick.
Yeah, Andy Dick.
Gross.
Huge
in a Page Boy.
But he basically views them as property or pieces to get what he wants. So the moment he's getting pushed back, he's like, no, I'm going to show you where your place
is. But he wants that real human connection. Like, he wants to be friends with these people.
Yeah, he doesn't want to just control them to control them. He wants them to legitimately.
He wants them to love him.
But he ultimately experiences that lack of love and that pushback, which I can assume.
But I want to talk about the dinner scene, because for me, that that made me so unsettled on a level that like I can't really grasp, because it's so.
I can't quite understand. I mean, I get it, but I don't believe the setup for this. Like,
well, so that's what I want to talk about specifically.
Go ahead.
So he gets out of jail, and so you assume that everyone in his life knows about what happened to him, and he's trying to tell them. But for some reason, Steve and Robin have dinner with Steve's parents, who are kind of established early on as being like overbearing, like, what are you doing with your life, son? Type Gen X parents, them boomers. But I get there, and Chip is here for some reason.
The door is answered by Chip.
At
his
Robin
parents'
is
house.
like, I thought you invited him. And
no. He's like, why is he here?
Yeah.
She says, I invited him. So it's very important to know that in another continued effort of fucking Steven over, he has edged into her life by pretending to offer her free cable. He's inserted her into her space and is pretending to be friends. And since then they've become closer.
So this scene takes on a dreamlike quality to me. And it's like dreamlike in the sense that if you're an anxious person, you have these sort of weird fantasies where everyone hates you for some reason. Right? You assume that everyone hates you and everyone is like belittling you behind your back. And we see through the course of this party, it's like we see how Chip proceeds to gaslight Matthew Broderick's character and isolate him and like have everyone make fun of him and like, oh yeah, like attributing things that Chip has done to him in reverse.
Telling the tale from his desired point of view,
And we see progressively they start playing a very sexy version of Password. And of course, lawful good, cute boy, we must protect him, Matthew Broderick, doesn't want to say the word vagina to his mom. And this is where like he starts to break
complex
down.
Here, sir.
Yeah, it starts to break down. Well, but also they're going against the team of Chip and Julie and like trying to highlight. Basically, Chip is trying to cuck Steve in the very modern sense of the term, and it's working.
Yeah, he's turning his own family against him with these stories and everything. He's just chipping away at his integrity and robbing him of his legs to stand on, and no one really believes or they feel that he's overreacting.
Steven, I really think you're overreacting.
I'm not overreacting. You're all being fooled by him. He's not like this. He's a lunatic and he's a felon.
Whoa! For me, it's more horrifying than like a horror movie. Like I can deal with the fantasy of like a murderer or a slasher or some monster, but like this weird person who somehow, even though he's not really charismatic, is able to exude this influence over your life and control you. For me, this part of the movie, what I was thinking was going to happen was this is going to be a classic Hag's Tale, if we want to get into role-playing games, of a person who takes somebody's noble intentions and corrupts it to the point that they become a mockery of themselves. I thought the movie would end with Matthew Broderick killing Chip, and just like his life is in ruins, right? His relationship is over, and he becomes the monster by murdering Chip, reflecting the Ben Stiller murder case, right? Like he becomes the next media darling of like this mild-mannered guy who goes crazy and murders somebody, murders a lovable cable guy. And that, I thought that's what was going to happen. The new monster is born from the corruption of this character. That's not what ended up happening, but
no.
At this point, I was like, he's a horrifying villain, right? He's very horrifying and represents this like very real fear in people's minds, I think, or at least in my mind.
One thing I felt really interesting in this aspect of fear, the whole time you're going through this film, you've just got in the background the Sam Sweet investigation, and it's such a minor thing, but it always seems to come up like it's played in real well to where the angst and the dread that is kind of slowly percolating from that, just popping up, is always placed around Chip, like with the way that the transitions occur and everything, like just whether it was fresh off of a weird interaction with Steven or something, and it basically transposes those feelings and places it around Chip, and it kind of connects them, even though there is no real connection between them other than just the way that they lay it out.
And that's a great point that you bring up, Zach, is the fact that this film can be perceived one way, as Ethan has described, where you have this outside force invading your life and basically dismantling you and undermining your social relationships. But I want to compare this to another film, and I think when I make this comparison, you're going to see where I'm going with this. I want to compare this to Fight Club. And
okay.
And so in Fight Club, you have main character played by Edward Norton, and then you have Tyler Durden played by Brad Pitt. And Tyler Durden is all the things that this character cannot be, right? And one of the ways that you could see this going, and when you have that little, like, tiny little subplot with the Sweet case, where you have this foreshadowing of this conflict and eventually this murder, and ultimately the film ends with this reconciliation between these characters, and it's partially because, Steven is able to stand up to the cable guy, Chip, but then Chip also kind of comes to this self-realization where, all of his schemes have played out and there's nowhere else to go. But one of the things where I've been hearing you talk about this is that Chip is basically all, like, we were talking about Steven being the good boy, and Chip is the pure toxic masculinity invading his life.
Yeah.
Very
okay,
much.
I'm feeling this. I'm feeling this.
These are all the things that Steven should air quotes, be doing to keep his relationship with his own girl. And one of the things that cued me off is we mentioned how the cable guy gives Steven's girlfriend free cable, and he goes into her apartment. I was very interested in that scene, and I was very interested in where it was going. I remember seeing it, and so I kind of really paid attention. And yes, he peeks into her room while he's in the crawl spaces, in these giant apartment crawl spaces. But what he does is he spots a birthmark. All he does is he gets that as a piece of leverage against Steven. But he does not ogle her. He sees it, he grasps it, he moves on. He is not interested.
He brings it up.
Sexually.
It was hot in there.
It gets complicated by the fact that he says that. But knowing what kind of character that Chip is, it's also easy to read that as he maybe feels that that's just something that he should say. It's a sort of programming.
Right.
Yeah.
The overarching point that I'm getting to is that all of this energy is directed at Steven, including all this sexual energy. It's not exuded towards any women, to the point where he's living vicariously through Steven getting laid with someone else. Like, he's doing all these major steps. So it's almost as if the cable guy doesn't have a real name. He's almost like this exterior spirit or demon that has infiltrated Steven's life through media. Now I'm getting super like away from the plot and more to the like metaphysical, metaphorical.
So what you're saying is this is Faustus.
Yeah.
This is Faustus.
Yeah, everything that happens to Steven happens because he makes a deal. Even if he's pressured, he
Shit. Okay. Yeah. All right. And so you also see, much like Heisenberg, he gets a taste of that power, right? The Sleepless in Seattle bit where he's starting to like alpha mindset Robin, and it's working.
Yeah.
And he's like, this feels good.
Right. Even though
he's the one who knocks.
Steven, remember, is the one who gets in the van at the beginning of the film. He doesn't say no. Like, he's making these active decisions. So even though like it very much keeps these two characters separate, there's no Tyler Durden, we're the same character twist. I still very much feel like, and this is something that came to me while you guys were speaking, I don't even see the Cable Guy as a separate entity at a certain point.
I love this analysis. I love this. Yeah, I agree. Okay, I'll bring it up later.
That's the horror. You brought this upon yourself.
Right.
These are all of your own impulses. You want to go into the bathroom and beat up that guy that's seeing your girlfriend. All of these things.
He is the id. He is, in the Lacanian subject, he is the uncontrollable ego desire.
I really like that. Right? Obviously, it's not, but
we have to keep the film grounded.
It can be viewed. That's a good Fight Club take. I like it.
I'll bring it in. I'll bring it in later because I want to relate this movie and Reality Bites and Fight Club as like as a Hegelian dialect. Because you were because this is a Gen X as fuck movie. This is powerful. This is as Gen X is like High Fidelity. Gen X is Reality Bite. It's like Ben Stiller at this point thought he was like the prophet of a generation. I'm not going to lie, which is why we have the ending with the boomer humor book joke. But something's being told here beyond. We've summoned the demon into our conversation.
We also have a demon origin story, like where he has become detached from the rest of society. Like
he is a horror character, a monster.
And the Wendigo in American lore, you
the
have
Algonquian mythic creature.
Yeah, well, you have a member of society that leaves and cannibalizes and then stalks.
Right.
In order to survive. The thing that's scary about the Wendigo is that it is us. It is human.
It's
and
the
it has
beast,
been other.
yes, the animal desire within us to, be a predator, to consume human flesh, and that's mediated through cable, baby. Yeah,
that's right. Cable is the highest form of human sacrifice.
The great Wendigo. Why did you do this? Can we add another 2 hours? Fuck. This is the high level casting. This is it. This is the summoning circle.
We did it, boys.
We have brought the ghost of the 90s into being. How does Fight Club end? Fight Club ends with
self-realization.
With him embracing Tyler Durden as society falls down around him. The destruction of society as a whole. Being like, if everyone chooses this romance with yourself, then society will collapse. And it's seen as a beautiful thing, interlaced with porno images. Okay?
I would say that Fight Club.
We can't talk about Reality Bites.
I know, like Fight Club is a spiritual sequel to The Cable Guy, is what I want to say.
Yeah.
The way The Cable Guy ends is that there isn't this unification. The Cable Guy realizes his separateness, his otherness, and that he doesn't belong in Steven's life. And he literally ascends and flies away out of his life before latching on to another.
He almost sacrifices himself.
Yes.
But then doesn't. I wish he fucking died.
Because someone has to kill the babysitter.
Someone's got to kill the babysitter.
Beautiful slasher reference as well.
And then man remembers book.
So
without
Chip's
TV, there's
character throughout this, for me, like I did not have 100% of the time I want this character to die. Like in the beginning you're like, you can kind of relate to him. You're like, oh, he clearly has some issues, and then like you start to it's like, okay, maybe, and then you go on the other side. But then at the very end, again, he comes around, kind of makes you be like, okay, maybe this isn't such a bad guy, because he to quote the film, he was just like, I don't know, I'm just kind of winging it here. Like he didn't know what he was doing. Right. He didn't know what outcome he wanted. He's just a lonely guy. And at the very end, he's like, you know what? No, I shouldn't be doing this. Someone has to kill the babysitter, and he jumps off the tower and sacrifices himself like for the betterment
so that we
of,
can have like a few minutes without mass media.
So I just found it a kind of redeeming moment in quality to the character, but
I'd say that until the very end.
Until
Yep,
I was
played
just
as a
about
goddamn joke. It's like, I'm about to stalk someone else.
He just goes back,
back on my bullshit.
While he's been, I love that outro though, like where he's just like, "What's your real name?" He's like, "You really want to know my name?" And then he gives him Ricky Ricardo. Like,
and he makes like there's wacky mask sounds.
He does the laugh. I mean, it's from I Love Lucy, man. Like he does. I love that shit.
He doesn't lean into it at all. He has no true realization. He just realized, almost as if he just realizes that this is done. I need to move on and be like the walking dude in the stand and just move on to another system.
But as he is accepted, he's ultimately accepted by Robin and Steve.
I thought it was really interesting to watch this right after binge watching You on Netflix, which is all about stalking and dangerous moves. No impulse control. I just thought it was really like a really interesting mindset. Like I was just like, I just watched
Hobbies
2
for
seasons
single
of
men.
Yeah. Hobbies for single.
I want to also relate it to Fatal Attraction.
Yeah.
Where Steven is lured by the sexual peak that is cable and mass media. And then it destroys his life and infects it, because truly the relationship between Chip, the cable guy, and Steven is a romantic one. And you have this miscommunication, this failure to connect, where Chip is just repeating the same process and the same like system of behaviors from one person after another and perfecting those strategies and behaviors. And unfortunately, it does not lead in his destruction. And also, there doesn't really seem to be, other than losing his job, there aren't too many consequences for Steven. And since it's the 90s, losing your job means you'll have one in a week.
Yeah, right. Like he can discover himself now.
He did go to jail.
He does now have a
He's got a case pending, yeah.
So
you can fight it.
That's right. He got lawyers.
He's got lawyers.
Yeah, right. Yeah, it's supposed to be, I think, a happy ending.
There's. I feel like there's enough with the cable guy being this kind of mysterious evil force that he could get, like, like he could get those charges dropped, especially if he can reveal the spider network that the cable guy has
of the cable,
unless the judge is one of his preferred customers.
Exactly.
Oh no, it's the information
superhighway. So anyway, I want to segue to culture at large.
Yeah,
I feel like,
and can I introduce everything that Chip predicted as he triumphantly stood on the satellite is true?
Yes,
we can play Mortal Kombat with our friends in Vietnam. Talk about pervert movies with our friends across the globe. Cable has taken over. Though this is the internet, it's not the same thing as cable, but whatever.
It is, though.
It's through coax, baby.
That's right. I was watching the cable guy through my PlayStation. Like,
that's true.
On
home shopping, like, we're in it, baby.
We just didn't quite understand.
The line is blurred.
Yeah,
which means I think we feel the most like Chip now in the year of our Luigi 2020. We've all become Cable Guy. We are Cable Guy,
or at least we are afraid of Cable Guy. I feel like Cable Guy is much more likely to be on the streets today.
We dance with that devil.
We're seeing Cable Guy out with the counter protesters. Right? Like,
much like, so really 2019's Joker is a remake of Cable Guy.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. Honestly, yeah. Yeah. And
much like Home Alone is a remake of Sam Peckinpah's Straw Dogs.
And if we are Steven, we are the cucked social justice woke society that are slowly getting played by the destructiveness of mass media, which is deteriorating the minds of those around us. Like, let's be honest. We are.
Oh no, and us too.
Us too.
All of us.
We are becoming pod people at an increasing rate. We are seeing the most vulnerable fall and become cable guys first.
Yes.
Which one of your family members is now a cable guy talking about QAnon at the family reunion and asking if you want to invest in his off-the-grid network?
So if we look at Chip as a character and not as like a monster or fiendish spirit, as a human being, right?
Right.
He's suffering from this intense, intermediated alienation from everyone else.
Yep.
He has adopted television and media as like the guiding ideological principle of his life. And so because of that, he sees every other human being as a commodity to be transacted with.
Yep. He sees them all as characters in his own drama. Ultimately, what he is doing is he's not even, I don't even know if the end goal is to successfully permanently infiltrate into Steven's life. I think his goal is to create his own drama, to be the antagonist in his own story. Because what's the end goal of this black man? There is none. Because he can't see past the credits rolling, is what I'm thinking of this. Is like his motivation is to star in his own show that is his life. Because that's all he can think through. He has been completely maladjusted and he has not socialized to the point where like all he thinks of are characters. And I mean, there was a time in my life where I was that too, when I was a preteen, where like I didn't have many friends and all I saw were the interactions on TV. That's why you got to fucking kill the babysitter.
Right. So his come to Jesus moment is he needs to destroy the thing that he loves the most, right? He adulates the praises of cable triumphantly on the satellite dish and then decides.
The altar.
Yeah, it's
very much an altar to like mass media. It is a holy place.
One of my favorite quotes of this movie came from this scene when they're climbing up the ladder, and he's like, "The problem with reality is there's no theme music to coincide." And he's like, and he's like, but it lines up with the actual music, so like you hear it with him, like. It's just like, okay, it got intense all of a sudden, but
he loves the music. He loves doing music, that mouse music.
His TV show.
Raise your hand if you haven't inserted theme music in your daily life ever once.
It's funny that the Star Trek...
No hands are raised.
The Star Trek battle thing is such a big deal because, like, that became a thing for me later on, but that was because of Family Guy, right? Like, it happened in Family Guy, I think.
Oh.
It's where they had that joke where like Peter makes the Star Trek and it plays the Star Trek.
You know what? I remember that now.
Yeah.
Stole it from the cable guy.
Hey, we're all in Palm Far now, baby. Like that's all. This movie is dreamlike in a sense. Have you guys seen Joe versus the Volcano?
Yes, when I was younger.
It's like it's like a fantasy movie almost in the way the sets are designed and stuff. And this is like the middle ground between like a Fox Family drama, realist depiction and a stylized Terry Gilliam depiction of a world. And that like the environments are very, I think like the business he works at is very streamlined and aesthetically clean. And it almost looks like a real place, but not quite. Just like his apartment, which we all want to live in, but you can't buy unless you're a millionaire now.
There is no clutter.
Right. And one thing that really stands out to me is how they reference contemporary movies in this film. Not just old stuff like Laverne and Shirley and Star Trek and stuff, but also Waterworld is brought up. Movies from the year before are brought up, which makes it like this hyper real thing. It's like, oh, it's talking about stuff that's like in my life now.
Yeah. And I mean, we all kind of live in our own references, right? We're all constantly making references to media that matter to us. And to see someone so disassociated, only perceive reality through references is amazing.
This is the first meme.
I feel like it's one of the reasons why it holds up so well, because the movies and the other media that they choose to reference and touch were like the right choices to make, because you could have picked other topical song or TV show or something, but it wasn't as influential of whereas Star Trek and these other references that they make were and still are major hits and
Right.
very well known.
Right. And the balance is good. It doesn't do like the Wayans brothers epic movie or whatever, where the references are already dated and bad by the time they're in the movie. And so instead watching it now, it feels more like a period piece where you're looking back. And that's why it feels like such a Gen X early 90s movie.
Because the references that he makes are how we also perceived those films. Because when he mentions Waterworld, he talks about how, oh, I thought that was better than everyone said it was. You know? Whereas like a Wayans Brothers film like Scary Movie, it's them watching trailers for films that haven't come out yet and just quoting the highlights from those with no context in how we actually interacted with them. That's why they feel so dated and alien, is like, because so many of these jokes didn't actually have an impact. Whereas everybody fucking knows Waterworld, at least anybody that's
surface
older than 18.
material, superficial type jokes and not like something tangible or of substance.
Right.
But as far as capitalism and anti-capitalism and how just the utter consumption and consumption as an end goal of our lives, to have your life revolve around media consumption, to improve your relationships through consumption, the blurring of lines is the other big theme of this film, I feel like. And we touched on it earlier with the subplot of the Sweet Murders. And this little subplot of Ben Stiller killing his fake twin brother and then fake calling 911, blaming an undisclosed Asian population for it. This is definitely a reference to the Mendez brothers and the O.J. Simpson trials, and how those, as well as the Maury Show and Oprah, like we have the early days of reality TV and the blurring of lines between what is actual fiction and what is reality.
And here, okay, genius level move, right? At the beginning, you get cuts of like real shows, and then in between that, it shows like a half-second clip of the Ben Stiller murder case, right? And so you're like,
playing it off.
And I noticed, I'm like, oh, that's not real. It's a very deliberately blurring the lines, right? It's
so
cool.
It's a great representation, like you were saying, of those cases, because those cases literally had America like glued to their TVs.
Exactly.
Like, it was all anyone could focus on and talk about, and it's not necessarily because they needed to. It's just because it was there.
It's a media circus.
It was in their face, because cable during this time frame had just such a grip on so many things. It was before the internet and everything, so your main consumption of anything entertainment came from cable. Usually it ultimately just comes down to like the influence and control that media has over its audiences. A major thing that I saw and wanted to bring up was, before the Sweet case even came to a conclusion, which happens right as the movie ends, even halfway through the film, there's a commercial on TV of a recreation of the Sweet murder.
Good
and
shit.
It's like, it's a made for TV film depicting him in the light of the murderer and labeling it based off true events. So it's painting him. So media is already, they're shoving all this out there and influencing the view by the nation of this highly publicized and media rampant case before it's even resolved. And it just goes to show like how much everyone was dialed into it as well, that something could be made like that. And because that's something that you don't care about unless you're in the moment of it. Like, you're not gonna watch
starring Eric Roberts.
Yeah, starring. It looks great.
And one of the things to kind of emphasize how things have changed from then to now is that cable was massive then, but there was still only 20 channels worth watching, and the internet hadn't taken over as this new form of media where you could create and upload your own media, and that couldn't compete. There was no real competition with these massive like channels. The O.J. Simpson trial, and even before the trial, the Bronco chase. O.J.
Oh yeah.
Cops. It was so watched. It like a network cut away from an NBA Finals game to show the Bronco chase. Like that's how much of a big deal that. And it's one of these like escalating things. It's an arms race. It's a media arms race. One channel starts showing it, and they have great ratings, so the other channel has to start showing it. And even though it's the NBA Finals, you're still going to get better ratings if you just show a slow-moving Bronco. All of a sudden, it just consumes the zeitgeist of the times.
Was there a moment like that in our culture before 9/11?
I mean,
they're like the Bronco chase and like dominated all news media, all media. 9/11 did the same thing.
Yeah, that might be.
Is there any other event that did that?
No,
I don't think so.
I don't think so.
Because because it's a live moment. I think that's the biggest distinction. Is that and that's why it drew so many viewers, because basically people were watching to see if OJ got shot or beat up.
Right, I can see that.
And eventually the police like slowly followed him to his house and took him into custody peacefully and off camera, which is like one of the few good times the LAPD has ever done anything as far as picking up a perp. But everybody, like, we have to recognize why people were watching this. And why everybody was drawn. Like, it also like broke pizza delivery sales is another like weird fun fact. Like, everybody stopped cooking dinner to watch this shit, and it was because they might see a man get murdered on live TV.
Right.
And
Papa John had a field day.
Yeah, I bet he did. And so that's why it shows up in The Cable Guy. And you see that parallel. It's consuming Steven's life. You're thinking that it's going to end in bloody murder the same way. But I think ultimately Stiller and company didn't want the film to end on such a horrid, actual, real moment, which would happen. They kind of chickened out a little bit, I feel like.
Yeah, I feel that.
Really, and like, I gotta say, like, if you're gonna have a guy pick up a book for the first time, at least have him start at page 1 and not like whatever section where and he's just like, oh, this paragraph is good on his face.
I think it worth mentioning that guy was played by Kyle Gass, aka the other half of Tenacious D.
Yes.
Oh yeah, they're all there, baby.
The cast on this film,
star-studded affair,
is amazing.
I cannot tell if that book was supposed to be like a joke or not, because that seems like the edgy early 90s thing to do, right? Is like the grenade. It's like the art of someone throwing a grenade, but the grenade is a TV camera.
I mean,
right?
with the actor doing it, like
he very clearly remembers book. He like remembers the written word, right? This is like librarian porn. He's like, oh, the smell of the pages.
Well, at least I have my books.
Yeah, this tired copy of fucking Lady Chatterley's Lover. Like Chapter House Dune or something stupid.
That's kind of what I wanted to say about capitalism and mass media consuming our minds over a long form that is our lives. So does anybody else have any like poignant thoughts on the film that you wanted to touch on?
So this is a pervert film because like Chip watching Robin undress, that's the audience, right?
Yep.
We watch the OJ trial because it's live and because we get this beautiful, this tragic, like very tragic act. It becomes something that we can consume and indulge in, right? And that is sort of the damning thing of the audience, I think, of the movie's trying to convey. And Chip realizes that to fix society, he needs to destroy the thing that destroyed him.
Right. The thing that
dehumanized him. And then he lives. Terrible.
It would have been an amazing reveal if he jumped off and nothing happened because he didn't exist. Or if he did die, like he does get impaled. And
I would prefer that they just end with the montage of the blurry screens and man remembering book.
Yeah.
That's what I would have preferred.
If they'd have ended it there, it would have been perfect. I agree, because you have all the screens happening at once, this big culmination. He hits Man Remembers Book. Roll credits.
Do you find the helicopter scene to kind of weaken the ending?
And that we find out that Chip has actually not learned anything.
Right.
Yeah, exactly. He's like there. He's like, oh, Daddy needs a rest. And then he starts to stalk someone else who I thought was Clint Howard at first.
He's the walking dude. He reawakens
EMT.
after his demise.
He is Randall Flagg.
He is Randall Flagg.
He's the Joker, and the Joker lives within all of us.
Truly.
I think if we learned anything in 2020 is we're all Jokers. We all got premium cable, the most premium cable of all.
Should we ask the question, what happened to the actual cable guy?
Oh, shit.
Because it's made clear that he has never worked for...
No, he had worked for the cable company, but he got fired because he started stalking people.
Yeah, and the initial conflict starts because of the classic joke. He had waited for him for 4 hours and he didn't show up, and so he got into the shower, and that's
I see Matt Broderick in the shower all the time.
Literally, as soon as he gets in the shower...
Cable Guy!
What happened to the original cable guy is a really great question.
Well, I think he just probably like intercepted the call with his high tech abilities.
Maybe he's
you don't know.
I think he hooks the cable up because one, love of the craft. He's connecting the world. Two, that's how he gets slaves.
Oh yeah, that's
basically.
his life. Like
he loves it. He worships cable.
It makes sense that he would continue to work as a cable guy on his own time. No pay, like he's just like, let me just sneak in and install cable in the most optimal way. Let me read this room with my body real quickly.
Yeah, he's gonna sex it up.
It's right here. Here's your sweet
I'm
spot.
gonna roll with the theory that Steven never actually called to have his cable set up, and he set it up himself.
Oh no, he really wanted that cable there at the beginning.
He did call them though.
Did he? It could be a very Tyler Durden-esque moment. Where's the cable guy? And they're like, well, he should be on his way. Or was anyone on the other end of that phone? I don't know.
I'm going to make the argument that Steven and Robin never existed.
This is true.
And that this was
This is a movie. This is a movie.
Wait,
none of these people exist.
You got me.
Fucking movie. What's wrong with you?
You got me.